Welcome to Sky Team's People First with Morag Barrett. Here, we'll be exploring the people side of successful businesses, careers, and lives. We all have a story to share, and there's something to be learned in every story. Join us to learn from authors, business leaders, thought leaders, and people just like you to uncover the latest ideas, resources, and tools to help you become more effective at work and life. As it turns out, the secret to success is cultivating winning relationships. Business is personal and relationships matter.
Welcome to this week's episode of People First. And my guest this week is my new friend and colleague, Dr Riza Kadilar, who I met at the Thinkers 50 event in London just a few weeks ago. Dr Riza is a leadership thinker, global executive, and author of 4 books, including his latest, The Contemporary Leader, which was published by Wiley. Riza's work challenges leaders to move beyond good intentions and surface-level gestures and instead take inclusion seriously as a leadership capability, one that shapes decisions, culture, and results, especially when things get difficult or uncomfortable. In our episode today, we're going to explore what inclusive leadership really looks like in practice, why it often breaks down under pressure, and how relationships, not just policies or principles, play a defining role in whether inclusion actually sticks. Riza, welcome to People First.
So nice to be here. All right, so nice.
I am so looking forward to this conversation. And it was a beautiful moment in my memory of us at the London Guildhall. And we were in the networking room and there were hundreds of people. And I just remember internally I was going, I don't know anybody. And as I weaved through the crowd, you had raised your glass to let a waitstaff pass. And I remember walking up and raising my glass to cheers you, if you see what I mean. And that literally was what broke the ice and the start of what I will refer to as a beautiful friendship. So I'm curious, what do you remember of our first encounter? And I'm also curious, what's your key takeaway from Thinkers 50? Because it was your first time there.
No, that was my second time, but that was my first time having such an amazingly nice moment, like the, hey, cheers, that was love. It was courageous though, courage is there, but also curiosity. And then the whole thing that, and then the dinner and everything, I got to know your friends. It was such Thinkers 50, there were lots of the takeaways. Of course, big debate on AI and how to really kind of make it human or not. And then also there was a kind of big debate on sustainability, even though it's still a fashion or not, whatever. And that was so lovely to be with all those, so many intellectually triggering, amazing conversations with everyone I bumped into, like Daniel Pink, whom I really admire and I like. It was nice to kind of, meeting in person and many more. So that was a lovely event. And the real treasure is I got to know you.
There you go. I mean, I have to say, walking into a room of, I'll describe these folks as gods and goddesses in our world. So Amy Edmondson, Dan Pink, Frances Fry. I mean, some real well-known global recognized thought leaders. And yet everyone, our colleagues, are just open and generous. It is just such, to your work, an inclusive environment. Nobody is left standing on the wings looking in. Everybody leaves feeling included and connected, which is interesting to me because often you can go to an event and it's the opposite. What do you think the difference is there?
It's like being invited to a party. We got invitation to many parties in our lives, but then whether you really feel comfortable dancing in that party or not, that's the key question. So that's one of the part of my book I cover, what makes it this party inviting? So how do you feel comfortable there? Even though you are different, you are in a totally different environment. You don't know other people. You don't know, there are so many different perspectives in the room, but you feel included. You really want to go with the dance, with the music. And there are many reasons, and some of them are really like subconscious reasons, where sometimes we block ourselves and sometimes there's an invisible hand blocking us enjoying the music. So getting the invitation is one thing, or buying your tickets, whatever, but also then feeling that feeling when you're inside. But again, it's sometimes little gestures, little coincidences that makes you feel comfortable in the environment. And your chair was definitely one of them.
So I'm smiling because I am or I have been in the past a ballroom dancer. So that idea of being invited to the party and asked to dance. But then you talk there about sometimes, you've got the good intentions. I either bought the ticket or I was sent the invite. We set RSVP'd, yes. But you talked about the behaviours that can undermine inclusion. So where do you most often see well-meaning leaders actually undermining inclusion in their day-to-day behavior?
So many unconscious biases around, and this is okay, because the human brain is wired to make quick reactions, and that's what makes us maybe survive. Okay, so there's nothing wrong with it, but some of the very basic reflexes, reactions can create. For example, one of the topics I cover in my book are privileges. Whatever you call a privilege, okay? For example, using your right hand is a privilege because many door handles or whatever designed for people are using their right hands, not the left hands. This kind of basic things. For example, education. Education entitles you, or corner suite, or the whole statues or titles or whatever you name it. So these are all well-deserved achievements, okay? So this is the cradle of our civilization. You kind of, deserve your achievements and everything. But at the same time, in a world where things are changing so rapidly, they become a barrier for inclusion. So many business leaders, implicitly or unconsciously, based on their privileges, but privileges are very basic things, okay? Like, it doesn't have to be like a, known, well-known, or well-visible privilege. We tend to prevent others or block others to have this feeling of inclusion because they feel excluded in one way or another.
So what I'm hearing there, and certainly I've experienced it at two levels. One is that systemic door handles designed for those who are right-handed. And so therefore, how do you adapt and break that down? But also the individual subconscious or sometimes conscious biases that cause us to exclude or not include others. So starting with that organizational piece, there is so much in the headlines, certainly here in the States, about diversity, equity, inclusion. But what are those costs, hidden or explicit, culturally and commercially, when inclusion becomes just the checkbox performance rather than a practice part of how we do business?
You know what? In my research, I realized and I was convinced that diversity is a checkbox exercise. Inclusion is a feeling, an emotion that you share or you don't share. And equity is a problem maker. Let me explain. Because equity is such a subjective concept that designing a universal equity concept for everyone, everywhere in the world, for all generations, is practically impossible. So that's why we used to tend to have our common denominators. We tend to design some universal truths or cultures and everything to kind of make people feel the equality or equity. But it's a time bomb. It's a difficult concept to really cover on a kind of systemic basis for the whole society. Whereas diversity is inevitable. In Europe, in many countries, in many cities, I'm sure it's even more in the US, the number of population who are not born in that city is increasing so rapidly. It doesn't like migration or immigration or whatever. It's a natural course of humanity now. We tend to move around. And it's not just one subculture moving around. We're seeing so many Asians moving west or the Western or South America, south to north, north to south, for many reasons. It doesn't have to be like awful bad reasons, but for many good reasons, people do move around. So it's impossible to really ask for your neighbor to be like you. So it's obvious that people are diverse and will become more and more diverse. And diversity is not about only background, it's also about the perspective. It's about psychological background, the way we feel, the way we handle the world. And the world is changing so rapidly. So that's why diversity is inevitable. And there's so much research that more diverse you are, especially once you have the AI or other tools together with you, diverse in terms of age, in terms of gender, in terms of background, the way of life, religions, whatever you name it. That makes these groups more resilient, more successful. It increases the quality of their judgments and everything. So diversity is something we can't really stop, especially thinking about the climate challenge, more immigration to continue, but also AI, which kind of learn from us and learn, what is right, what is wrong. And if AI is educated in one way, we are creating a doomsday scenario for the future. So there are not one way, there are so many ways of life, cultures, and that's why we need to also feed this diversity in the system. Which brings me back to inclusion. So we can only do that if we are all feel included in the system or being visible, being heard, being respected, very basic human needs. And we tend to kind of, with all good intentions, we tend to kind of, prevent those flourishing. So it's a systemic thing because, as Dr. Harari says, in humanity, like our ancestors, the Homo sapiens, they were not the fastest or strongest or whatever, but they were the one who knew how to get organized, collaborate. So that's how they win over others, homos, and then they conquered the world. We are here, we are. So implicit in our mind, those communities who can collaborate better, coordinate their actions better, they flourish. All over history, in order to achieve this, we created people alike, homogeneous societies. If you wake up at the same time of the day, it's like armies of like cultures or educations or whatever you name it. And those societies flourished. The problem today, with the all inevitable diversity coming in our way, we can't really continue and aim for formatting communities and people just in the one way. So that's why now, in the age of humanity, history maybe first time, we have to embrace the diversity and to make the best use of it. But every concept comes with the opposite. More we are embracing and seeing and observing this diversity, that really beg for inclusion. We also see that it's a threat for old way of thinking. That's why everywhere in the world, the political system is polarized. So it comes in both directions, and we're going to see which side will win and how humanity will continue its journey. But that's why I got so excited with all these topics, and it ended up being a kind of book that you mentioned.
It was powerful. Yay. Love it. And I mean, again, you're right. Diversity isn't the problem in that you'd only have to walk out your front door. There's 7 billion people living on their planet. We have diversity. It's the accessibility and the opportunities that are provided to each of us that we can do better at. And so it seems to me that there are systemic things that can be resolved in a top-down sort of way. Bathroom stalls for women, for one, for example. I mean, again, just picking one that came to mind. But there is also the individual influencing out into my immediate sphere. And what can I do? So as I think you touched there earlier about power, privilege, and it's essentially leadership maturity. So if I think of myself, or if I think about leaders in organizations, what has to shift inside of each of us before we can genuinely share power, invite others to the party to dance, and yet still feel effective?
One of the episodes, one of the anecdotes I had during the journey of writing this book, one day, I'm Turkish origin and Dutch by marriage. And it was in 2017-18, we moved house from Turkey to Netherlands. And my daughter went to high school, international school and everything. And I was still the general manager of a bank in Turkey, commuting in between. And one day I came home, and I love my daughter. She loves me. We have a good relationship and everything. And she told me, and she's taken all this course about diversity, inclusion at school. And then she said, "Dad, you're the one we need to get rid of."
What?
I said, how come? What's going on? So she said, you are the middle-aged, gray-haired, heterosexual man in power, general manager of a bank. So you are the one who is really against the change. Like you are the one who is kind of representing the dominant, powerful figure in society, in corporate life. And, in order to have more diversity, we need to have people not like you, okay, in power. Okay. But luckily at that time, I was doing my move from Turkey to the Netherlands. In Netherlands, I was not necessarily kind of, the color in power, okay? And I even didn't really speak the language. I was starting my own kind of business there. So which kind of power we're talking about here? So I realized that and nobody wants to be an obstacle for change, okay? So at the end of the day, I realized it was a kind of awakening, a kind of moment for me. It's also contextual. It's also your situation. So take me as the general manager of a bank in Turkey and with all the other characteristics and everything, I may be in the way of the change and bring more diversity in the system. But when I change my role in a new country, in a new position, like creating my new adventure here, I'm the one who is suffering. I'm the minority here. So then I realized that the first thing to answer to your question, for the change to start, it's those who are in power, whatever your power you design, okay, you define, it's up to you to define the power. Whoever who can control anything should first be aware about their attitude, their position vis-a-vis this concept of inclusion. And during the work, the research I did for the book, I asked many academics about how do we define our capacity for inclusion so that we can increase our capacity for inclusion. And we couldn't find a proper solution to that. But what we have realized, we can identify what we exclude. And if you know what you exclude, for what reason, then you have a chance to make a decision whether you include or not. So by being aware of what you exclude, you can maybe increase your capacity for inclusion, or maybe not, but it's a deliberate choice. So my position in Turkey to Netherlands, my daughter's silly comment kind of made me realize that I need to be more aware of what I'm excluding in my life, where I'm becoming a roadblock for change, which kind of people, society, or like new experiences, new way of life, I'm in the way. So more I realize about this, I don't have to be inclusive for everything. I have my own kind of, limits, my personality, my background, and everything. I can't really change everything in my life. But I can't be captive by my prejudices and unconscious biases and everything, and to create something bad for the society. So that was the wake-up call for me. For many inclusion-related work, I see people are working for the unprivileged part in order to empower them. My work is to work with those who are already empowered and to make them realize that unless they change, they are blocking a better world. They are in the way to create a more harmonious, maybe tomorrow for humanity.
Yeah. No, I was listening to that and thinking you and I have lived similar career arcs, obviously from a different perspective, because my first 15 years was in banking in England. But when I joined, most bank managers were men, old enough to be my dad. I was one of the but I was on that first wave, second wave of female bank managers. So I saw the shift in culture as to, the women who were training me were remembering that in the 70s, they weren't able to get a credit card without their husband's permission. And there are so many layers in all of those little anecdotes. And then you have your daughter's comment, whether in jest, seriousness, or whatever context, where that's inclusion misinterpreted, where you look and say, well, you fit that mold, so you are actually the problem. Oh, wow, that kind of breaks my heart too, because effective inclusion isn't about necessarily taking away from anyone. It's making sure that we're not missing, as we started at the conversation, all the data that shows when we have different experiences and voices at the table, we end up with a richer understanding and invariably a better solution, product, service, widget, understanding, whatever it might be, that helps us to all be better together. And having moved as well from, the UK to America, I thought that was going to be an easy move because in theory, we speak the same language. No, we don't, as I've learnt to my cost. But I could imagine moving from Turkey to the Netherlands. Yeah, I've seen America on TV and it's just like that. But it also is nothing like what you see on TV. And it is the implicit customs and norms and etiquette that we have to either learn or ask others to help us to understand so that we can either assimilate or choose to not adopt, but make it an explicit choice versus an accidental omission. It's complicated. And so one of the things about inclusion, you used the analogy earlier about being invited to the party and then also being willing to dance or being invited to dance at the party. My work, and for example, my signature keynote, it's fine is a 4-letter word. And research shows that loneliness is literally an epidemic around the world. And as we move through our careers, leaders may give the impression of being connected, but are also lonely, isolated, and disconnected from their colleagues. So how do you reconcile the paradox of inclusive leadership with the loneliness that many leaders are reporting that they're experiencing?
Which is very interesting, Morag. In my research, I realized that, inclusion is not only for different way of life, cultures, people, but it's also the same pattern in our mind when it comes to different experiences. So the growth mindset concept really helps the inclusion, because at the end of the day, having a neighbor who is different than you is also the same thing about having a new experience in your life that you never tested before. So more we grow in our career, in our way of life, in our status in society and everything, more we create patterns that makes life easier for us. And those patterns exclude new experiences. So maybe loneliness is a big topic. I'm not an expert of this big topic, but the more you create your own patterns in life, those patterns on one hand helps you, but on the other hand, those becomes walls surrounding you. So you create a castle for yourself, but that castle is also becomes a prison, because that castle protects you from the dangers of the world, but also it kind of prevents you to discover the beauties of the world. So that's why maybe early age and all through the way, we need to be curious enough and we need to learn where to focus our curiosity so that we tend to try new experiences. We should learn how to feel uncomfortable, but still in harmony with ourselves. So this inclusion concept very quickly goes to like society, culture, immigration, whatever. But actually, it's a journey within me. All through my life, what am I allowing to myself to experience? Something new, something different. I include it or not. But unless I test or try, so I create patterns which make me maybe at the end more lonely at the end of the, even though I'm surrounded by people. Does it make sense?
Yes, it does indeed. So on that note then, through the writing journey, what was one thing that most surprised you as you refined your research and thought process to produce The Contemporary Leader?
I put it in the preface as well. I realized that I'm totally not inclusive. So the way I was raised, I was totally the antidote to inclusion, okay? So more I realized that, inclusion is something that I truly believe in, need it, I like it. There are so many things I'm a kind of missionary for inclusion, whatever. Then I also realized that every moment I have my own walls, I have my own patterns, I have all my barriers. So it was a great journey. Each time I realized a generalization I have, which kind of blocks me, then that was lovely. Each time I had to sit down with myself and to think about whether it really serves me or it becomes a barrier in my life. So I had so many times of this episode. So I can say I became more inclusive on the journey, on the way, but put me on the scale. From where I come is good, but I think there's a long way to go.
Fabulous. Well, thank you for sharing. And I appreciate all of the insights you've shared today in our conversation. How can people who are listening or watching this episode learn more about you and your work?
The book is available on everywhere. There are also some podcasts and everything. So a quick search will end up getting to know me and the work better. And they can always reach me over on LinkedIn. So I'm doing a good job in answering all the inquiries from LinkedIn. So I think that will be the best way.
Well, I look forward to our next opportunity to be at a party together and to raise a glass to each other. I appreciate you being my guest this week on People First.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining Morag today. If you enjoyed the show, please like and subscribe so you don't miss a thing. If you learned something worth sharing, share it. Cultivate your relationships today when you don't need anything before you need something. Be sure to follow Sky Team and Morag on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And if you have any ideas about topics we should tackle, interviews we should do, or if you yourself would like to be on the show, drop us a line at info@skyteam.com. That's SKYE team.com. Thanks again for joining us today, and remember, business is personal and relationships matter. We are your allies.